Friends and fellow citizens, this time last year, my colleagues and I had already made a fateful decision on your and our behalf. In the nature of the circumstances, there was no time for consultations. We could not find out what the consensus would have been had we refused to acquiesce and insisted on going on with the kind of Malaysia which we envisaged it was at the time when we agreed to join. But I think it is useful this evening not to go back to the past, the whys and the wherefores, to apportion blame, but more to search deep into our hearts, to ask if the things we set out to do were right or wrong, were good or bad. And I say that we have no regrets. We are completely unrepentant that we set out to build a multiracial, for some time a multilingual, a multicultural community, to give a satisfying life to the many different kinds of people who forgathered here in over 150 years of the British Raj. And we, in the end, on balance, decided to carry on with our multiracial experiment, if you like, to call it, just in Singapore alone, rather than be forced into large-scale conflict in Malaysia. Nothing has altered, not the basic data, nor our basic thinking. What has altered are the circumstances in which we find ourselves. I think it is reassuring on an anniversary to weigh the odds, to see how we have performed. The promises against the performance. And my experience of Singapore and her young, active, energetic, if somewhat exuberant people, is that given honest and effective leadership, an honest administration within which to bring forth themselves, they will make the grade. It has been a year of great and sudden change. Very few countries in the world go through the kind of climacteric we have gone through. 61 to 63, we fought for merger, to sink ourselves in the identity of a bigger whole. 63 to 65, we found ourselves gradually embroiled in something which we half suspected but never quite admitted was possible within such a multiracial situation. And in 65, with decisive suddenness, we found ourselves asunder. And all the while, all the political unpleasantness that followed, we were making progress. Imports went up, exports went up. These are facts and figures, not fictions of the imagination of my colleague, the Minister of Finance, They are checked against every indent that goes in and out of the Harbour Board or Singapore Port Authority. They are checked against our revenue on the same rates of taxation. The number of factories, people they employ, the goods they produce, the value, the houses being built. And they tell a story which I think we have very little to be ashamed of. Almost in spite of ourselves, we forge ahead. Revenue up 10%, economy surging forward. I'm not saying that this will be so for all time with no effort on our part. But I say we will progress so long as we reward initiative and resourcefulness. And as long as whenever we face peril, courage and resolve is never found wanting. But more than just making material progress, like other groups of human beings, wherever they are found in the world, we seek permanent salvation, security to time immemorial, to eternity. And we believed, and we still believe, that salvation lies in an integrated society. I use the word advisedly, integrated as against assimilated. I would not imagine for one moment a Singapore government trying to assimilate everybody. 75% Chinese trying to convert 10% Tamils and Hindus and Tamil Muslims and Northern Indian Muslims into good old Chinamen. Or not even good old Chinamen, good old overseas Chinese Singapore brand, Singapore type. I wouldn't try it. It's not worth the effort. Nor would I try it with the other groups. Certainly not my colleagues like Othman Wok, who has been here for many, many generations. Or even my colleague like Tuan Haji Yaakob from Kelantan, where he was born. Why should we try the impossible? But I say integration is possible. Not to make us one grey mass against our will, against our feelings, against our inclinations, but to integrate us with common values, common attitudes, a common outlook, certainly a common language, and eventually a common culture. And this is most important, that we should understand what is it we are after in the long run. And if we are after a permanent and secure future for ourselves, then this must be done. A society which, as it progresses, improves, flourishes, gives an equally satisfying life to one and all. And if groups are left behind, either on the basis of language, race, religion, or culture, and those groups, the line of division coincides with the line of race, then we would not have succeeded in our long-term objective, a secure future. For so many other countries in this part of the world are faced with the multiracial societies that gradually form themselves over the period of colonial rule. And broadly speaking, there are two ways in which we in Singapore can set the pace. First, prove that the migrant element is dynamic, is thrustful, is industrious, and can get on. Of that I have no doubts. But in the process of getting on, is unmindful of his wider responsibilities and his long-term interests, leaving in his train a whole trail of frustrations and bitterness which must have its repercussions throughout the whole region as men's minds begin to ponder on the unpleasant consequences of what we have done or what we have manifested. The other is to demonstrate how a forward-looking, not a backward-looking, not looking to the past for examples, for patterns of behavior and conduct, completely irrelevant in the modern society that we find ourselves. Man reaching out for the moon and the stars, and we don't find our solutions by turning up the dusty pages of some chronicler in some ancient time telling us about some ancient customs more relevant to his days. But that forward, inquiring outlook, keen to learn, keen to make a success of the future. And if we can give everyone, regardless of race, language, culture, an equally satisfying life, then surely that must be a benevolent or a beneficial influence on the whole region, as other people turn their eyes towards us and say, but it is not true. Given the right political attitudes and the aptitudes and the framework of a good, effective administration, all can thrive and prosper. It is in the nature of things that we must talk in parables. And the older I become, the more I'm convinced that sometimes perhaps the prophets speak in parables because they also had to take into account so many factors prevailing in their time. But I would like to believe that we are a people sufficiently sophisticated to understand parables and the value of ever searching new solutions, new ways to achieve old targets. Never be depressed, never be deflated by setbacks. We suffered setbacks. 1964, 2 communal riots. And we don't pretend to ourselves that they weren't communal riots. They were. We face facts. And this is one of the greatest strengths about Singapore. Its willingness to face reality. The 9th of August, we used to celebrate the 3rd of June. Then it was the 16th of September when we promulgated Malaysia. Then it went back to the 31st of August. Because other people celebrated the 31st of August. Then it has to be the 9th of August. But the 9th of August it is. Not because we wish it to be, but because it was. And this capacity to face up to situations, however intractable, however unpleasant, is one of the great qualities for survival. A people able to look facts squarely in the face, calculate the odds, weigh the chances, and then decide to go it, are a people not likely to go under. And when this time last year, before the news was broken to the world my colleagues and I carried that heavy burden in our hearts of having made the decision on your behalf. We consoled ourselves with this thought, that whilst thereafter that multiracial society which we had set out to create can only be implemented within the confines of Singapore, we knew deep down that ultimately its impact must spread far beyond its shores. No geographic or political boundary can contain the implications of what we set out to do when we succeed. And there is no reason why, given patience, tolerance, perseverance, no reason why we should not. In this hub, in this confluence of three, indeed four great civilizations created a situation which will act as a yeast, a ferment for what is possible, given goodwill, forbearance, and good faith. Thank you.